All right. It is my pleasure to introduce our MSU leadership speaker, Dr. Laurie Thorp. Dr. Thorp is a faculty member in the Department of Community Sustainability and director of the Residential Initiative on the Study of the Environment, or RISE, an interdisciplinary living learning program at Michigan State University. She teaches a first year and advanced seminar dealing with current environmental issues. Dr. Thorp assisted with the curriculum development of a competency-based sustainability specialization at MSU as co-investigator of a $625,000 Department of Education grant to assess student learning outcomes. She has served on the MSU Vice President for Finance and Operations Environmental Stewardship Systems team as a technical team leader for behavioral research associated with strategic change initiatives advancing campus sustainability. Her research interests are focused on participatory methodologies and alternative knowledge construction for sustainable food systems. She is co-founder of the MSU Student Organic Farm and Bailey Urban Farm. For the past decade, she has collaborated with colleagues in the departments of animal science and philosophy to study sustainable pork production and student ethical development. Thorp's work has been published in Qualitative Inquiry, Agriculture, and Human Values, the International Journal of Sustainability in Higher Education, Resources, Conservation, and Recycling, the Journal of Ethnographic and Qualitative Research, and the Journal of Experiential Education. Welcome, Dr. Thorp.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I wish I could see all of your faces. And I promise, I just have 2 slides that's going to give you a little bit more about my background, and then the rest of my presentation, I want to be helpful and useful for you all. And there are going to be some tips in there for you as women in STEM. So my background, I started my graduate career at Texas A&M, where I completed both my master's and my PhD. My grad committee was comprised of 5 strong, amazing women, and our research group was trying to understand leadership education. This was my first publication in my work there. During my first semester teaching, I noticed that there was a difference in how women participated and engaged in the class laboratory. And so my group said, you know what, let's start to study women, undergraduate women in agriculture, and see what you find. So my journey supporting women started many years ago at that moment and has not stopped. I also need to mention actually that my mother went to MSU in the 40s. She was part of the MSU debate team. And so I come by this strong leadership. Naturally, thank you, Mom, for all of the mentoring that you provided me all these years. My PhD work took me out into the field where I was studying women and children in a quote-unquote underperforming elementary school. We developed a school garden there to teach across the curriculum, meaning we were looking at science and mathematics and literacy. One of the reasons was when we were studying the school, we heard over and over again from the teachers that they were uncomfortable teaching science. This came as a great surprise to us, but it became one of the key things that we wanted to study more. And one of the findings that was exciting was the garden eased our teachers' fear of science. And I can go on more about that, but I really want to get to my tips for you. So, tip number 10, don't try and do STEM alone, okay? It is much, much better when you are with others. Seek women in STEM. This is a picture of me and my friend Kim Chung. Seek women in STEM and nurture those relationships. Early in my career, I formed a circle of women, friends, and colleagues who I came to trust, who we could listen to each other, we could laugh, we could cry, we could go get ice cream when needed, but please don't try and do it alone. Tip number 9, find a mentor. This is a photo of my mentor, Yvonne Lincoln at Texas A&M. I can't imagine where I would be without her. She at the time was editor of Qualitative Inquiry. She introduced me to the world of peer-reviewed publications, encouraged me to write. Mentors play such an important role in our ability to navigate the challenges that we all face as women, especially in the academy. You will also become a mentor someday soon too. Some of my most favorite mentor stories come from our MasterCard Scholar era here at Michigan State University. This is a photo of me with John Tenga Tenga from Malawi and Vincent from Rwanda, and I continue to mentor these amazing young men today. I just had the pleasure of traveling down to Ohio State to see John Tenga Tenga, who's back here now working on his PhD. It's a photo of Shata Alabad. I hope she's on this call. She's from Saudi Arabia. She was our commencement speaker here at Michigan State University right after COVID. She's an amazing woman who is now working on her PhD at University of Minnesota. We continue to talk monthly, and I'm continuing to mentor her. Here's my colleague, Dale Roseboom. I have been mentoring students with him for well over a decade. That's Ellie, and she's learning how to give a little piglet some vaccine. Ellie's now in vet school down at Ohio State, and I continue to encourage her along the way. So find yourself a mentor early on. You will have a mentor for as long as you are working and beyond. I highly encourage that you also think about mentoring some women in STEM. It's such a rewarding thing to do. Tip number 8, find male allies. I look at these pictures and they make me smile and they make me feel so lucky. Preferably men at the top. And so people like Doug Eastry, Fred Poston, so instrumental in my success. Benny Gore, who is still a mentor for me today, and Frank Fear. All of these men have supported me throughout my career and continue to do so. They're so important, especially when you need someone to run interference. They know that the playing field isn't level. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Tip number 7. Make sure you raise your hand in meetings. It's scary, I know, but so important. And the little story I want to tell you here, I remember vividly, we used to have chairs and directors in NatSci 105, and I'd go to those meetings, I'd sit in the back of the room, sit in the back row, never sat at the table. It was too scary. That's where the men sat. And one day, Kay Gross, who was an amazing mentor in my life, tapped on the empty seat next to her and said, "Come sit up here with me." And that seemingly small act of encouraging me to sit at the table with the boys in room 105 was a big moment. So I encourage you, raise your hand. I know it's scary, but it's so important that you don't let the men dominate the conversation and fill up the room. Tip number 6. For the longest time, I didn't identify as STEM. I thought STEM was only for those in white lab coats doing bench science. But guess what? STEM is everywhere. It's not just in the lab. It's out in the field. There's eSTEM, there's STEAM, there's STEM Plus. This is me behind the camera here with 2 of my amazing students out at the Student Organic Farm with this beautiful group of Nelson Mandela scholars who are here this fall semester. They're asking my students questions about climate change and farming. And yeah, this is doing STEM. Really important tip, network. I can't say it enough. This advice was given to me in grad school. And a small networking story for you. My mentor at Texas A&M, Yavanna Lincoln, is very close with Ann Austin here at Michigan State University. They've been friends for decades. When I was leaving grad school and took my position here at Michigan State University, Yavanna called Ann. That's what mentors do. She called Anne, and then Anne called me. She reached out and said, let's go get coffee, Laurie. So when I got here in 2001, I had the pleasure of having coffee with Anne Austin. And then Anne, also being an amazing woman mentor, connected me with Frank Fear. So Yavanna called Anne called Frank. I can't imagine where I'd be in my career without that initial networking in my life. So those of you that have networks of power, activate them for people who are seeking them and share your networks. This is some advice that I give grad students all the time. Choose your committee wisely, and these should be people who will share their networks with you. Tip number 4, self-care. It's so, so important. Figure out what works for you. You get to decide what kind of self-care you need and when you need it. And so I put this just to show you one of the ways that I stay grounded in my self-care. And I'm going to click this little video. This is Daisy at my farm. She's my most amazing, wonderful, and I lost my click here. Yep, Daisy eats trees. I hope you're all smiling and enjoying her beauty. Find what works for you. Make sure you take care of yourself. It's so, so important. Daisy keeps me grounded. And one of the reasons animals work for me is, you know what, when you're out with a 1,200-pound beast like this beautiful girl is, you are focused on one thing, and all of your concerns from work drop away. So please, please find some self-care techniques that help you. Whoops, that's not what I want. I want to go on. Tip number 3. Don't be afraid to ask important people out for coffee or beer. I can't tell you how much I have learned over the last 25 years by saying to a colleague, hey, can we go grab a beer tonight or next week or sometime next month? You got time for coffee? We are spending way too much time on Zoom. Make time to go sit down in person and talk. People will share things with you over a coffee or a beer that they won't necessarily share via email or on Zoom. You're humans together. It's really important. These are priceless conversations that usually lead to mentoring or networking or a new grant or an idea that you want to pursue for a project. Don't be afraid to ask important people out for coffee. Tip number 2. Yeah, that's one of my chickens. That's my living room. That's my lap. Ask Doug Eastry about my chickens here at MSU. What I want to tell you with this picture, because she's such a funny little girl here, is stay true to yourself. For many years, I felt I had to hide my unique qualities, my quirkiness, all my strange things that I care about. My ways of constructing knowledge, my ways of doing science were kept kind of hidden into myself. I was living what Parker Palmer calls the divided life, and a divided life feels bad. It only contributes to imposter syndrome, which I think many of you on this call probably identify with. Please stay true to yourself. Don't hide your unique qualities. There are many ways to do science. Sandra Harding, she's a post-colonial feminist philosopher. If you have not read her work, I encourage you to, or email me. I'm happy to send you some of her writing. Sandra Harding has written extensively about the concept of multiple sciences, or sciences from below. She's a brilliant scholar. She changed the way I think about science. Please remember to stay true to yourself and don't hide your uniqueness. And tip number one, my last tip for you, and then we'll take some questions. This is a quote that I wrote in my conclusions and recommendations section for my PhD as I was beginning to explore participatory and action research methodologies. This is a photo of Meg this summer when we were working with UCOM for them to do a big shoot for a commercial they were producing. Meg is one of our amazing beekeeping students, and she wants the world to know about pollinator decline. I just love this photo of her. And what you see is this young woman telling her story to the world. So my last tip here, what I wrote in 2001, and it still holds true today, is we hold the power of legitimized knowledge in the academy. Make something happen. Don't be complacent with your privilege. Go ahead, you pick. There's so many stories out there, hundreds of untold stories waiting to be heard. Grab the spotlight and then step out of the way. Thank you so much. I would encourage any of you on this call, feel free to reach out. My email is here. It would be a great joy to talk to you via Zoom, go get coffee. This is why I'm here today. And remember, you are not alone. There are tons of amazing women out there ready and willing and able to support you, have conversations, have coffee. I'll open it up for questions now.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I resonated with many of the things you said. And I will say from my perspective, your networking slide, that is the number one thing I tell people, particularly women who are in STEM fields who want to branch out. And it's such a powerful resource. So well done. Well done. Plus, I mean, the pictures and the videos, I mean, come on.
Oh, good.
Fantastic. Okay, so you actually answered a lot of the questions that came in ahead of time. So very well done. But one question I think I wanted to ask was, what unexpected challenges have you experienced that made you a better leader? And how or why did the challenges help you grow?
Oh gosh. Probably the biggest unexpected challenge in my life, in my career, was both of my parents becoming critically ill and passing. When I was working on my PhD, I was in my fourth year. I lost my father and my mother during my master's degree. And so both of those, I tell people now in retrospect that I was in grad school, but the real grad school in life is when you lose a parent. Or a sibling or a spouse, right? Death puts you in grad school of a whole nother level. And what it taught me was a couple things. It taught me, you know what, you've got to, you're human, and that you have to be comfortable with being vulnerable. And that's tough, right? It's tough to cry in front of your boss or a colleague, or to fall apart, literally, right? But guess what? You find out that everyone else has a story that is pretty similar, right? Of the bottom falling out of your life. And they're there to help you pick back up the pieces, and you become really strong. And so it also teaches you to have help-seeking behaviors, that you've got to learn how to ask for help. And we tend to think we have to do it alone. And so don't. That was one of my tips, is find caring colleagues. They're out there, just ask, and you'll be amazed how many people will come forward to help you.
Yeah. That empathy as a leader is a very important tool,
Yeah.
But to have empathy, you have to be authentic and vulnerable yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you spoke a lot about mentoring and the importance of mentors and did a wonderful job acknowledging so many of your personal mentors. For the people on this webinar, how would you recommend that they get connected with women who could value mentorship?
Yeah. It goes back to the slide about going for coffee or going for beer. My mentor, Yvonne Lincoln, I was reading a paper by her or reading a chapter in a book, and I said to a colleague, wow, I'd love to meet this woman someday. And they said, well, let me connect you, right? I know her. I bet you she'd go to lunch with you. And I went, really? And so, people love supporting each other, right? We forget that, and that you're not imposing, and that everyone that I've encountered, and if they aren't willing or able, then they're probably not going to be a very good mentor. If you reach out and say, hey, could you tell me a little bit more about I'm struggling with, or I'm trying to learn more about, can I have, 20 minutes of your time, phone call or coffee? I have yet to have someone say no. And then usually from that, they're going to say, and you know what? I have this really great colleague who does X, Y, and Z. Let me connect you with them. So I would just say, don't be afraid to reach out and say, can I buy you a cup of coffee?
Yep, absolutely agree. And I think that what you said there too is also important is when you ask people for that connection and buy that cup of coffee or have that beer at the end, ask them for yet another connection.
Yeah.
So you can build that network. So that's really great. Okay, so here's another question is how did you stand out for job interviews and what advice would you give to those trying to break into a new career with little experience?
Oh gosh. Stand out in job interviews. I go back to my slide. Don't be afraid to be unique. You're going to go into that interview thinking you have to be in this box that was the job description. And you do, to a certain extent, have to show that you've met those qualifications. But we're all, when I'm hiring people, we're all looking for someone that is authentic and real and maybe has something unique to offer us. And again, this goes back to my mentor, Yvonne. I remember vividly her saying to us, surprise me. I'd love to be surprised by something, right? And so we don't want just what's, expected. Give us what makes you special.
Yeah, and that doesn't always have to just be around your career experience either, right? What makes you a person? What are your interests?
Exactly. Be a human being.
Yep.
It's scary, I know, but you got to learn to make yourself a little bit vulnerable, right? And that might take some time.
Yep, absolutely. All right, other question. Do you have suggestions for people online today who have struggled finding opportunities to connect with students? How do you suggest finding ways to connect? So the students might be asking them out for a cup of coffee, but if they aren't having anyone ask them, how can they go out and find people looking for mentorship?
Oh, wow. My guess is that's going to be folks like Sarah Ford and we, and, I'm thinking about you all that work in the Alumni Association. Certainly if you're looking for students, I always have a panel of alumni ready, willing, and able to reach out to my students. I don't have names off the tip of my tongue, but we've certainly got folks, I would think, that organize this call that can help connect you back to professors that we're talking about alums, correct?
Yeah, or just in general, if they're working
To connect with students. Yeah. Gosh, I'd probably reach out to maybe department chairs in your field and in your discipline and have them reach into their faculty, because lots of my colleagues are like myself, where we love to connect our students with folks out in industry or have them come and speak to our class. So those opportunities are there.
All right. And I know the MSU has a mentorship connection because I know I've been contacted a few times by putting my name out there too. So
yeah.
Okay.
But LinkedIn, my students are all on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, I think my students frequently are looking through LinkedIn for that.
That's wonderful. LinkedIn is a far underutilized resource for so many people. So, all right. What has been the absolute most meaningful experience you've had at MSU?
So it's probably going to go to my work with the animals, and my work with Dale Roseboom and the students out at the farm. I'm going to say, well, gosh, MasterCard Scholars has been amazing too. Hard to say the most. I'll tell just the animal story. It's just a snippet. So certainly when we were raising pigs with our students out at the student organic farm, and we did this multiple times, it never ceases to just fill me up, is watching students for the first time assist a sow with live birth. So usually mama decides she's going to farrow at midnight. We do round the clock monitoring of the animals. We're all on a group chat, and I'll get a bing, it's midnight, and a student says we think she's about to give birth. And then driving out there and being with, 15 students assisting a sow with live birth when students have never experienced the live birth of a mammal. Watching that is just priceless. Watching new life come into the world, watching students watch new life come into the world, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So I'll say that's one of my top favorites.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. And last question. How do you balance a career and life outside of work?
Yeah. You have to know how to put up some boundaries. And for everybody, it's unique and special and different. I can't give you a formula on that, but I have a certain time when I turn it off when I get home, and a certain time when I'll turn it on in the morning. And I try and make sure at weekends it's limited, so that it does stay in balance. And you're going to have days where it's not in balance, right? You're going to have days where you're working way late, but then that means you owe yourself, and I always do this, then you owe yourself to make up that time. And so those boundaries, you got to make sure you figure out how to do that, and then have someone that helps keep you accountable, who says, that's that circle of women friends. It says, hey, we haven't seen you in a while, right? Are you taking care of yourself? Yeah, you look tired. You look sleep deprived. You got to have a circle of friends that helps you keep those boundaries.
That's so true. And boundaries are setting boundaries is not a skill set many of us have grown up knowing how to do. And I do think we see some change in that. That and no is a complete sentence, right? All right. Well, I want to thank you so much personally. This was so incredibly enjoyable. You had tremendous words of wisdom that were given beautifully and simply, and your career is just it's awe-inspiring, and I'm personally very grateful for everything you've done.
Oh, thanks so much, Stephanie. And I truly mean it to all of you on this call. Do not hesitate to reach out. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. One of my greatest joys is mentoring other women. So shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to follow up.
Thank you so much. Take care.